That's what I was waiting for. It's usually mid-conversation. Good evening, everyone. I'm Monica von Campania at Education for Tomorrow Alliance, and we are happy to have you join us this evening for our Distinguished Speaker Series. We have a very special guest this evening who will talk to you about her path in law and how she got there. And, you know, it is different, as we were just mentioning, from any of the other folks that we've had talk about their careers in law previously. And so I think you'll get some good insights to the type of work that she's done. She's someone that I've known for probably 5-6 years now, and just really admire, and I'm excited for you all to learn a little bit more about her. With that, I will turn it over to our I also want to mention and thank our program sponsor, Oventive, who supports all of our career programming throughout the year. And so we can't do programs like this without great supporters like Oventive. And now with that, I will turn it over to Corinne Coates, our program director, to tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, good evening, everybody. Just want to give you a couple of what kind of lay of the land things. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If this is not your first time, we welcome you back. You kind of already know what to expect, but just to give you a refresher, we are in webinar form, so we cannot see you, but you will have a chance to ask questions. And so we encourage you to use the Q&A function or the chat feature to submit your questions. And you can do that throughout the first portion, but the last portion of the hour will actually be Q&A time. We will bring you over, ask you to unmute to ask your question. So if you do not have access to a microphone, please let me know that whenever you're submitting your question. You can also do the raise your hand feature if you have that ability down at the bottom of your Zoom bar. Also, if you're doing this for school credits, you do not need to turn in your one-pager to us, nor do we have the forms that need to be signed. You can get that from your school. So with that, I will turn it over to EfTA board member Charlie Panias, who will help us introduce our speaker for this evening.
Hello. Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about Stacey, who I just got the opportunity to meet. But she's had a long career in law as an attorney and business person, and I'll just talk a little bit about her. Miss Stacey Burton is an attorney who's serving as managing general counsel for a company called L3 Harris Technologies. She's worked for over 20 years in the legal space, including private practice, working directly for companies, military service, which I thank her for, civilian service with the Environmental Protection Agency, you may have heard of this, called EPA, and with NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Stacey's a member of the New York and Columbia bars, which means she's qualified to practice law in multiple states. She went to university primarily early on at George Washington Law. She has 2 master's degrees in government procurement and environmental law, a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science, international relations from the University of Florida. And most recently, she's completed 2 executive programs for business at Wharton School of Business. She speaks often about regulatory compliance, cybersecurity at conferences and with national organizations. So quite an accomplished speaker today. So very impressive. Stacey's career included active service with as a judge advocate general in the Air Force. She worked at multiple law firms and companies, including chemical companies and technology companies. And right now, like I said, she serves with L3 Harris as a managing general counsel, managing work around broadband communication systems sector for that company. So with that, I just want to give her an opportunity to talk about herself. And I'm going to hand it over to Stacey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, there's a lot of education in that, right?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I am a very curious person. And when it came to choosing a career, my parents early on determined that law was my path. And I said, okay, sure. It has allowed me to be a lifelong learner. I like to ask lots of questions, problem solve, and it's one of my strengths. So I definitely found the law to be something that aligns with my core personality. So this evening, just wanted to talk with everybody about education options and the options that I chose, the typical career paths, and I took many of them, and just a little bit more about my path, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So as I mentioned, my law career started off with, my parents basically saying, "You're going to be a lawyer." I said, "Sure, thanks." And when it came to determining what kind of undergrad major I would take on, I found out that you can major in anything and go to law school. So I was most interested in political science, international relations. I thought maybe I'd work for Department of State and be an ambassador, as well as a lawyer, just see what happens. And so I pursued both of those majors when I was at the University of Florida. I went to GW, which is a law school in DC, and I majored in corporate law. But at the same time, I was pursuing a master's degree at the international school at GW. Ultimately, when it came time for me to make a decision about attending school for an additional year or starting my law career, I decided to abandon the last year for the master's program for my international relations master's and dedicated all of my time on my law. And so I started at a law firm. Antitrust law is what I started with. And so antitrust law is all about like competition between companies. And so if there are companies that combine together or come together to establish a price that's anti-competitive and it harms the public, lawyers either defend them or, the government comes after them. And so I was on the defense side for big companies. And lots of litigation, which meant lots of court time, lots of documents, and companies have tons and tons of documents and emails and all of that. And that's how I began my career. And then I pivoted when I had my daughter, and my husband at the time was in the military, and I decided to join the military. I became an attorney for the Air Force, which is not a typical path. Most folks who go into the military go straight out of law school, but I worked at a law firm first for 5 years. And I learned to become a generalist. So I was highly specialized in antitrust. And then I became an attorney who prosecuted criminal activity on base. I dealt with contracts and contractors, slip and falls, you name it, it was on my desk. And through that experience, I learned that I really liked environmental matters and contract matters. And so I went back to law school and got a master's of law degree in both environmental law and procurement, which is basically government contracts. And from there, I went on to work at NASA. And so at NASA, I did government contracts law as well as ethics law. And I worked with the astronauts down in Houston. And that was pretty fun. Really liked working with the astronauts. They have a lot of really interesting issues. You know, when you're working for the government, you're not allowed to accept like gifts, but they get gifts and honorarium all the time. And so as the ethics attorney, I had like this big safe in my office where I would get all of their gifts that were over a certain value and just keep them because for, I guess, international diplomacy reasons, we wouldn't give them back. We didn't want to insult a nation that had provided a gift to an astronaut. So instead, like a Rolex would be in my office, or back then it was like one of those PlayStations. Folks got them, didn't matter. I just kept them all in my office. So I was the mean attorney who took all the gifts away from the astronauts. After that, I ended up going to DC and working for Environmental Protection Agency, and any government contractors who engaged in misconduct, my entire office would work to make it so that they wouldn't have access to government funds anymore and couldn't be a contractor. Because if you engage in bad behavior, you shouldn't be entitled to it. So I did that for 6 years. And then my daughter was in high school and at an age where I didn't necessarily need to be home as much. And so I left the government, went into private practice, which means I just went back to the law firms and did that for a little while. And then I realized that I really enjoyed having a mission and being a part of a team. When you're outside counsel, if you're at a law firm, you're just the hired gun to handle a dispute. Solve a problem, give advice, and then that's it. Then they call you again whenever there's another problem or an issue. But when you're a part of the government, the military, or in-house within a company, you're a part of the everyday issues that pop up. You know the decision makers. You help them make good decisions. And so I then left the law firms and went in-house with a chemical company. And I primarily focused on the government contracts business. And then from there, I pivoted to my position now, which is with one of the top government contractors in the United States and highly regulated space, cybersecurity. So if you've ever driven past like a government building or a military base and like your phone loses connectivity and you're like, what happened? Well, we, broadband communications sector, we create that technology, right? So it's encryption technology that works with satellites and other communication data links to allow military members to, in real time, share data that cannot be detected. And also, on the other side, if there is any other frequency that is not the government's frequency, we scramble it. And that's how you lose connectivity. So it's one of like a lot of cool, neat things that the engineers that I work with come up with. So the government may have an issue, a problem to be solved, and we work to advance technology to enable the warfighter to be able to safely conduct communications, recon and all of that, and come back safely. Really, that's the goal. But my day-to-day life, what does that look like? My day-to-day life right now, I am responsible for the entire legal function and I'm a part of the executive leadership team. So that basically means that contracts, ethics, anti-corruption, global trade, they are all considered the legal function and of course legal. And we work to identify and reduce risk for the business, whether it be negotiating contracts, handling disputes, working with outside counsel on litigated matters, dealing with employee misconduct issues or lawsuits from former employees, the entire gambit. So you may recall that I said when I went to the military, I became like a generalist and had to handle everything. Well, when you're in-house, it's the same thing. You end up handling every legal issue that comes about for the business. And so my team is about 61 people in total. And we are the folks who help the business stay compliant with the law and do what we need to do for the warfighter. Key takeaways from my experience, right? So if you followed it very quickly, I was I went from school to a law firm to military to government, back to a law firm, then in-house twice. All of those experiences allowed me to better understand our number one customer, which is the government. Allows me to better understand our internal leadership team and their perspective and where they're coming from. From a lot of our members of executive leadership are former military members. And being outside counsel as well as being in-house, I understand, the pulls and the issues that are presented when you're outside versus you're inside and how we can team better. So my career path as a lawyer, I think I hit most of the spots that lawyers find themselves working at a company, military, or government, or a law firm. But there are other ways, right, that you can be a lawyer. You can be a judge. You can decide not to practice law at all. A lot of our contracts team are lawyers who just chose not to take the bar and to actually practice law, but they are excellent negotiators when it comes to contracts and making deals. So, the skills, the analytical skills, the problem solving skills, the communication skills of the legal training, we leverage that whenever we have a lawyer who's in one of those positions. And, just as another aside, as another career path that may be on the horizon for me, we never know. I've got 20 more years of working still. Board member, advisor, lobbyist, you never know. And that's all that I've got about my career path. Any questions?
Thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. Well, and we got some hands raised, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. Those are, it's fascinating to hear because and number one, probably a lot of students, they think law and order, like that's the piece of law that they see. How did you decide among kind of all the different ways that you could practice law? How did you decide that this was your path? Like, what was it that jumped out for you or helped shape that decision making?
Right. Yeah. So when I was in school, back then, and I don't know what the feeling is now, but back then it seemed like everybody wanted to work for a top tier law firm. And it's like groupthink. And, I started off thinking, oh, I might want to work for like a nonprofit or whatever. And quickly determined that I liked more of like the economic side of things and the business side of things. And that just pushed me right into a law firm, path. And really having had certain like life decisions, going into the military because of my spouse, I was basically just using my legal degree to keep myself, within the legal path. It wasn't until after I left the military that I truly focused on what I wanted to do, which was, working with the team inside of, the government or in-house and trying to effectuate change, and to be a problem solver and be a part of the team, and not necessarily being outside. And so, yeah, based on that desire, there were only like so many options. It was either stay in the government or go in-house.
All right, looks like we are starting to get questions. So Francisco, I'm going to bring you over if you could unmute yourself. Going. All right, we'll come back to you. Let's see. Isaac, let's get you. No, Mike, sorry. I just read your question. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, Isaac, what was it like working at the chemical company you mentioned earlier? I plan on being a chemist and would like to know how that intertwines with working with the lawyers.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I think that having a background of being a chemist first will make it very good for you. It's very valuable. If most of the folks that you're working with are chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, doesn't even matter. Having that background allows you to better understand the makeup of products. And so the chemical company that I worked for, they made products that were used in a number of applications. So it in aviation and automobiles and industrial products like home construction and all of that, and product liability, which basically means, hey, your chemical compound, your product didn't work, it fell apart at this temperature or whatever, we're going to sue you because someone fell out of a house or died or whatever the case may be. Having that background allows to better strengthen and protect the company and anticipate what can happen when new products, old products are offered into the public space, right? So I would say definitely pursue it. But at the outset, I mentioned you can kind of have anything as your background. A lot of lawyers who are first, for example, engineers, they will oftentimes go intellectual property route, but they don't have to. There are, lawyers who have biology backgrounds. I even met one lawyer who was a doctor, a medical doctor, an MD, went back to school, pursued a law degree, and is a litigator. So you can do whatever you want. But in terms of a foundation and what will be attractive to a chemical company, obviously a lawyer who's got a chemist degree would be great.
That's somebody who likes school within that, going from doctor to that's a lot of time dedicated to schooling.
Right?
One of the questions is more of a clarification question that Francisco had was, you mentioned, he said, did you say people didn't have to take the bar to be a lawyer?
That is
I
a
think
fact. You don't have to in certain jurisdictions. So, for example, my understanding is there's a famous person, her last name is Kardashian. She went the apprentice route. So I believe in California and in Louisiana, you can apprentice with an attorney and go through, you can skip law school and go through an apprentice program. I think they're for the apprentice way, you do still have to take the bar exam, but it may even be a different bar exam. I'm not certain. I don't know personally anybody who's gone that route, but I do know in certain jurisdictions you can. And also in certain jurisdictions you can be a judge and not have any legal training whatsoever and just be elected. So
So I'm going to guess that, because especially now that you work in a very technology driven field, how has technology changed your field, your role, and kind of where do you see this going as you move forward? Because these students will, a lot of they're still in high school. A lot of them they will have college and some version of law school more than likely before they have that opportunity, should they choose to practice law in kind of the typical path. So we're talking, up to 7 years, 8 years from now, minimum. So yeah, what role does technology play? Just because I would imagine it's changed quite a bit.
yes. So I will share with you from the, before I get into the company perspective, I'll go into the law school perspective, because I went back to law school many years after I graduated. So when I went to law school the first time, got my JD, we were handwriting our exams in blue books. And then unfortunately, some poor teacher had to read our horrible handwriting. And we had computers, but we just didn't do that. Everything was handwritten. When I took the bar exam, it was handwritten, all of the essay portions. Um, and even like the, multiple choice with Scantron. Now, when I went back for the Master's of Law degree, everybody was taking their exams on their computer. The technology allowed for your computer to completely basically be dead, except for the program that was running to allow you to type your exam essentially. And so I think that as technology changes, you will definitely be presented with more efficient and effective ways in which to study and to test. So be prepared for that. Now, when you come out and you're practicing, I think that technology changes everything. Like right now, we're dealing with AI. And what does that mean for us as a company? So if we're incorporating AI into artificial intelligence, is what I mean by AI, into a new product or endeavor, we need to know if we own it fully. We need to know that it can't, on its own, change its code and then deliver something to our customer that we never intended it to deliver. With AI now in the marketplace, it's a game changer. And I don't know that we fully know what the landscape will look like 10 years from now. Even in the last 5 years, AI has completely changed the way that we research, the way that we even advertise, right? So we have AI right now that can hear a voice for 5 minutes and then be able to replicate it and make additional conversations that it had never heard and have inputs and then go off as if it is that person. There's a lot of risk with that. There's probably going to be a lot of litigation. So as technology advances, I think it'll be great for ease of the human experience, but it may also cause challenges for the way in which we protect interests along the way.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And just even this week, I've seen news stories about, the music industry, and actors, and, they're using my voice, they're using my likeness, and all of the legal pursuits that could come from the, people trying to do those types of things, could be its own industry, right? Or its own, special sect of law. Thank you.
All right, Kaylee, I'm going to bring you over. You could unmute.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
I wanted to ask what characteristics with someone who's pursuing law, what characteristics should they have?
Well, I think you definitely should like to read. And I think having strong communication skills, being curious. If you're a person who likes to ask questions and you want to know what's behind, what's the rationale, I want to better understand where you're coming from. I think that's definitely a prevailing characteristic amongst most attorneys. Having the ability to succinctly communicate ideas, that's definitely a good thing. So, and when I say that, I mean for not just litigators. So you can imagine if there is a complicated case. The attorney who's speaking to a jury has to make it so that it's very simple and understandable by the jury so they can make a good decision and make a good determination for justice. But at the same time, if you are, for example, in my role, oftentimes there are complicated legal issues, legalese, and I have to speak at a level that is digestible for business folks who don't understand, legal terms of art. And so being able to distill complicated ideas into digestible communication bites is definitely a skill.
Thank you for the question. Okay, we had another one come in, so I'm going to read it because their mic is not working. Looking back at your high school years, what advice would you give to your younger self regarding pursuing internships or other opportunities to pave the way for a career in law? Good question.
That is a good question. I did not have good internships. So the advice I would give myself is to really not wait until I have gone to law school to pursue internships related to the law. So I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to mention it now. My daughter is an alum of the EfTA program, and she worked with one of the partners of your program, which was a law firm that dealt with, I guess, trust and estates, wills and estates. In high school, she already had exposure to many lawyers, and now she's in college. First year, she worked for a law firm that was criminal litigation law firm. This summer, she's working for an appellate judge. And my idea of what would be an acceptable internship was fully related to like my undergrad pursuits, so political science and international relations. My senior year, I interned with an immigration attorney, and I felt like that was the appropriate thing. And seeing my daughter's path, I realized that at no time is it appropriate to, or not appropriate to start having internships in your specific field. And the law field is so broad and vast, it actually is better to do so as soon as you can get exposure to what you do like and what you don't like, right? So my daughter determined that, early on, anything related to contracts and in-house was not what she wanted to do. So she started to focus more on litigation matters, not matters, but litigation opportunities, right? So now working for a judge, that's great. And she hasn't even gone to law school yet. So don't wait, get out there.
That's a great lesson, that sometimes learning what you don't want to do is just as valuable as getting a little bit closer to what you do want to do, especially when the field is so broad and diverse in
Yes.
with the path that you could.
We won't tell her that you mentioned her, so we won't pass that on. Okay, Lucy, I see your hand is raised, so I'm going to bring you over and ask you to unmute. Okay, maybe you changed your mind. All right, I will ask a question. Can you talk about one of the things that I know when your daughter went through the program and when other kids have gone through our program or they've sat on our career panels and things like that, we've talked about kind of the importance of having those people, whether they're mentors or they're your people that you bounce ideas off of, your cheerleaders, anything like that, kind of have throughout your life, whether that's one consistent person or different people throughout different stages of your life, being important for growth and encouragement. Did you have anybody along the way that kind of stood out as one of those, whether it was professor or people you worked with, and kind of what was that process in finding them and building that relationship with them?
Yeah, great question. So definitely I started off mentioning my parents. I have a wonderful support network within my family. They've always been my cheerleaders and supportive of, whatever decisions I've made with my career. And so that's been great. But when it came to external sponsors, mentors, um, in undergrad and in high school, um, I don't really remember reaching out to anyone outside of my family. But when it came to law school, I was close to a few professors. And when it came to my very first job, working at the law firm, there was an attorney who eventually became the managing attorney for that law firm, who took me under her wing and showed me the ropes and all of that, um, and exposed me to a whole nother world. Right, so I am the first person in my family to go to law school, and so I didn't have like a lot of experienced individuals that I could lean on. And so I definitely leaned on my professor and that mentor at my first law firm to bounce questions off of, to better understand, the dynamics of the workplace, and um, just to find my way through completely new world for me. Um, and I will say that the relationship that I developed with both of them still continue on. I am still, in contact and close with both of them. And as a matter of fact, the job with the chemical company came as a result of my professor having been a consultant for that company, and they needed an in-house attorney, and he said, "Hey, you should call Stacey," and that's how I got that job. So not only has he been a mentor, but he was a sponsor. And what I mean by a sponsor is someone who, when they're in rooms that you aren't in, they are there to talk about your resume and your accomplishments, and to move you forward with new opportunities. So definitely relied on those individuals, and I keep them within my network, and I give back. So as a result, I am on the board at GW, and I give back to GW. When I was at EPA, I established an intern program, and every semester I had vast majority of my interns were from GW. I did have some folks from other schools, but vast majority were from GW. And funny thing, just last month, one of my first interns actually reached out to me and let me know that he's general counsel for a technology company that's going public. And, very kindly, he attributed some of his success to me, which I was like, you shouldn't do that. But yeah, I mean, I'm at that stage now where I'm plugging into other people's, you know, um, careers in their lives and giving back what was given to me early on.
Can you talk a little bit about, I know that you talked about that your path was a little atypical for JAG, but I think that's probably something that students might want to know a little bit more about, like what's the process, like how competitive, like what does it take to go that path?
Yes. Okay. So I'll tell you what the traditional path is. So the traditional path is you go to law school. Most law schools will have like a government recruitment process. And military is oftentimes mixed in with that. And for the military, it's not like you go to a recruitment station or anything like that. You will meet with, for example, a local judge advocate, which would be like the lead attorney for the base. And they will interview you based on resume, your grades. Every service has different criteria. I was with the Air Force. The Air Force had a GPA criteria. You had to have like, I want to say it was a 3.0. And a desire to, be a part of the military. They, ask you questions during the interview to see if you're a right fit, if you can also deal with the discipline aspect of it, because not to be misunderstood, the military is focused on protecting the United States and the United States interests. And so you will run, you will be in a uniform, you will learn how to use weapons and other advanced technology items to protect yourself in a war environment. But at the same time, you're giving advice to senior individuals. And so they want to make sure that they're vetting you for good judgment and being able to deal with dynamic environments where there's a lot going on, and being focused and being able to communicate that calm, focused voice to chaotic environments. After that, if you're selected and you've been interviewed by the judge advocate and they recommend you, they will send up a packet, and the packet will include, at least mine was, your picture, an essay that you wrote, your resume, and a score that they gave you based on the way that you answered the questions that they have. And so then that packet gets bundled up with all the other folks that they've interviewed for that period, because there's certain periods when they interview everyone. And it goes to the Pentagon. And then there's an office within the Pentagon that basically racks and stacks all of the applicants. And every year there's a number of JAGs that are allowed to come in and be recruited. And so basically you're racked and stacked. And by the time they get to number, 50 or whatever it is, okay, those are the folks who will come on and be invited to go to OTS. So OTS is Officer Training School for the Air Force. It's in Alabama. You have a choice as to which date, but OTS is only offered, I think, 2 or 3 times a year. So you have to choose one of the dates, and then you go, and for, I don't remember, I feel like it was like 4 weeks. It might have been 6 weeks. You learn how to wear your uniform. You learn about military history. You learn how to be an officer. They're not teaching you to be a lawyer. You're learning how to be an officer. You must pass your weapons training. And that includes breaking down, a weapon and putting it back together again, and shooting. And I will transparently tell you that I didn't pass my shooting the first time. And so they allow you to go to your assigned base. So they assign you a base. They let you know what base you're going to. For me, I went to Illinois. So I interviewed in Florida, and then I was given an opportunity. So I came in as a practicing attorney. So they gave me an option, and they told me early on what my options were, and I chose which base I wanted to go to. That's not normal. Most people just kind of get assigned a base. So that said, you go to your base, and then you need to make sure that if you failed something, that you have, I think, 90 days to hurry up and pass it. If not, then they send you home. If you pass it, then you meet everybody at base, and then they send you off to the lawyer school, which is at Maxwell. Again, you're going back to Alabama, and you're there for, I want to say, another 4 weeks. And then they train you on military justice, um, international law issues, contingency law, cyber law. They give you basically the entire gambit, including torts, any type of legal issue, civil, criminal, that is seen by a military law office. They crash course train you in that 4 week, and you take exams, and then you pass, and you're ranked, and then you go back to your base, and then you start to practice. And depending on what base you're at, you're the person who gives advice to military members, regardless of what rank, what age. You're prosecuting misconduct, regardless of, what type of misconduct. And when I say what type, it could be a military member, it could be a civilian who's on a base who engages in misconduct, the full gambit. And handling complex issues, simple issues, divorces, leases, any and everything. You're pivoting back and forth. Whatever serves the needs of the military base that you're on, you and the other attorneys are it. So
That's a lot. Like, and you did all of that when you had a child, right?
Yeah.
So that like balancing of, I don't know, that seems like, I mean, with 2 children now, I'm like, that's a lot. So
yes,
yeah.
and my husband at the time was also active duty. He was Army. He was not Air Force. So that was quite an experience. But I will say this, again, because I came in after having practiced law, I asked certain questions and I made certain requests, and they accommodated me. I am very atypical. So my husband was going to be sent to Europe, and I was like, yeah, so I don't want to do that. I would like for you guys to reach out to the Army and have us co-located in the same place. Thanks. And they did. And so he also had orders and moved to Missouri with me.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, yeah, that was going to be my next question is, were you in the same area?
No, at the time we were both in DC.
Okay.
Even though I interviewed in Florida, I came in through DC, and when I was negotiating or talking to them about where I wanted to go and all of that, I was talking to the Pentagon folks. But that, again, atypical.
Mhm.
That's not the normal way. So
You're using those negotiation skills, right?
there you go. There you go. I mean,
A couple more questions, it looks like, that have come in.
Yes, we had one that came in. Have you ever met lawyers with a background in computer science? If so, can you elaborate on how they have utilized their computer science skills in the legal field, especially with the rise in technology and AI?
yeah. So I have met an attorney with a computer science background. He was intellectual property and trademark and copyright. And he worked trademark and copyright at a big law firm first. And I don't know why the computer science, yeah, that's interesting now that I think about it. No, so anyways, he did that. And then he went in-house and was a part of the intellectual property practice group, and dealt with a lot of matters. So it was a technology company. And so I think that they made a lot of software-based products. And so I think he was able to better understand the base products and work with the technical staff with having the computer science background. But at the law firm before he went in-house, I don't think he used his undergrad much, to be honest. I think it came in when he went in-house.
All right, we had another question come in from Francisco. He's thinking about going into the Marine Reserves, and so was going to ask about what it was like to be in a relationship with someone in the military, as it's something that he's been thinking about considering if one day to have a partner.
The military will work with you. They believe in keeping families together and preserving relationships. That said, it's significantly easier if you're both either enlisted or both officers. When you're not, it's a little bit more complicated. And then if you're different services, it can be very complicated. Because ideally you want the services to work together and keep you together. And so sometimes they can do that and sometimes they cannot, right? So for example, with me being in the Air Force and my spouse being in the Army, any base for the Air Force that was not very close to an Army base was out of, reach for me, for us, and vice versa for him. So we were not going to go to any place where there wasn't going to be easy access to the two, service offices. That may or may not limit your career, right? Because, for example, he was an intel officer. You go to Fort Huachuca, and then you get like certain types of assignments to progress your career. But if you're held only to bases that are co-located with Air Force, that may or may not be in your best interest. And for him and for his career, it actually was stunting for him. And that was a decision, that we both took. I mean, quite frankly, leaving from a law firm to go into the military, for my family, I took an enormous pay cut. And so we were at a place where it was more important for us to keep the family together than to fully advance our careers. And, kids are only young for but so long. So it wasn't that long that we had to basically be in that mode. But takeaway is the military supports relationships and families, and sister services will work together to support your family.
What would you say might be some sort of pitfalls or just some challenges? I mean, you hear, especially for folks that are going straight out of law school into a firm, that you're working all of the hours, that you have to hustle to get, kind of noticed by like, what would you say are some of those challenges that tend to, that you've seen colleagues through the years kind of experience?
I'll say what happened to me. So antitrust litigation is a hard burn. Lots and lots of hours and lots of long nights. So I typically got to the office 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I typically left 8, 9 o'clock at night. I had breakfast, lunch, dinner at the office. There was a cot at the office. So I remember we were going to trial and we were getting all of the exhibits together, and there was like, I don't know, 1 million. I'm exaggerating, but it was a lot. And working with the paralegals to get all of the trial books together. I was a first-year associate. I had to work with them while, more senior attorneys went home. So yeah, I slept on the cot and I worked a lot of hours. And one year so every law firm has like a minimum billable hours for you. And so I think my minimum billable was like 22, and then like the top was like 2,600. Sorry, 2,200, 2,600, something along that line, if my memory is correct. One year I maxed out all of it, and they were like, okay, so there's 2 more months in the year. You should do some pro bono work, Stacey. you've hit your back, you've overdone it. You worked way too much. And I was like, that's fine. I think I'll go to Europe for a week or so. And I worked on a couple of pro bono matters for the firm, which is also fun. And I liked it. But yes, if you like sleep, at least my experience back then, that was not like really an option. You're working a lot in the very beginning and learning a lot. Especially if you're on the litigation side. I don't know what the experience is if you're on a purely transactional side. Maybe like, the FDA healthcare attorneys or the intellectual property attorneys had more of a balanced life, but litigation, absolutely not. And a lot of people burn out from litigation in law firms. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
Thank you. You mentioned problem solving multiple times, which I want to make sure that students note and hear that. Are there other skill sets that you think made you good for the job?
So at the core right now, I am considered a subject matter expert when it comes to government contracts. So attention to detail, and being able to be super analytical, and consume huge amounts of information in a short period of time. Those are the three things that I think help me to be prepared for any and all meetings and opportunities and problems and issues. So I consume right now on a daily basis a lot of cases, regulatory changes all the time, because with the government, things keep changing. And with our legal system, it's based on precedent. And so a new case can change completely the way a specific issue had been handled for like 50 years, right? And so I have alerts and emails that come to me every morning, and I just digest all of that. And if I'm in a meeting and there's a problem or an issue that comes around, the expectation is that I'm up to date on all the changes in the regulations, the laws, and the case law that's relevant to my business. And so I have a whole system, and I have a really good recall. And so I think that those are the skills that I use every day that allow me to be successful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We are coming up on our 7:30 time, and we want to make sure that we respect your time as the presenter, but also students for you guys. So in the chat, can you help me thank Ms. Burton for joining us this evening and sharing about your journey and answering your questions. We appreciate you saying yes and just really sharing all that you know, especially for students that are interested in going into the legal field. It's a popular one here in Montgomery County, and so we appreciate you taking the time. Students, we have our final Distinguished Speaker Series session next week on the 18th. We'll be hearing from Ian Pleasance, who is a support scientist for the production of synthetic DNA through Millipore-Sigma. And so you can join us for that next week. You can find the link on our website. And all the details there, we'll also be sending it out through your college and career centers, but we appreciate you joining us this evening. And Stacey, if you could hang out, we're going to take a stage smiling picture.
Okay.
But with that, students, you guys are dismissed, and we appreciate you